The idea of a super tank is a failed concept. It does not work. It does not make the game healthier. It does not add additional gameplay options. It takes away player agency. Overwatch Classic has not even been out for 24 hours, and yet in that 24-hour span, a bunch of claims that have been made about 6v6 over the last year just got proven in that short amount of time. Today, we're going to talk about Overwatch Classic, what it proved to us, what was good about it, what was bad about it, and just my honest thoughts in general. So I'm really excited to talk about it. I'm really excited to see more 6v6 coming up, and I'm really excited to see super buff supports and super buff tanks slowly make their exit from Overwatch, as that was the thing that ruined the first game, and now, ironically, the exact same thing has happened at a greater scale in Overwatch 2. So let's get the bad out of the way out of the start. Obviously, if it's just replicating the launch patch of Overwatch 1, you're not going to have years of quality of life changes to a lot of the characters. For example, Genji can't cancel deflect, and when he dashes, he gets screen locked, and you can't actually turn while you're dashing, which makes for bad quality of life. Reaper cannot cancel his Wraith form. Ryan can't cancel Pin. He's only got one Fire Strike. Roadhog is Launch Roadhog. Actually, more fair it seemed like to play against than the current Roadhog, who can just run away vaping forever and never dies, but he has to sit still while he vapes. The hook is incredibly insane. I honestly preferred his old left and right click to whatever it is now. I think it was more skill intensive and made the character much more interesting. Bastion is sitting still in his Sentry form. Zenyatta is 150 HP and cannot move at all with Trank. The Lucio wall ride mechanics were not as fleshed out as they are today. Tracer, just really OP in general. Zarya is an absolute behemoth. Diva is unplayably bad. But aside from all of those things, we could go down the list of all of those things, which are really the only bad parts of the game, I would say, were quality of life and actual hero-specific balance things, right? What could we possibly learn from this format otherwise? And I think the most important thing, and this is going to open people's eyes big time when they actually get rid of the super tanks and get rid of all the pass. Obviously, no global regen pass, which I do think should stay in the game. In hindsight, that was definitely a good addition to the game, and honestly could make modes like open queue much more functional. But we can talk about that another time. But I think the most important thing to notice, obviously, no immortalities. The game feels a lot better without them. But is how much damage you're doing per elimination, right? You saw the amount of eliminations per 1,000 damage done almost maybe double or more. There are plenty of games in Overwatch Classic where you will have 20-something elims at 6,000 damage. In 5v5 right now, if you have 6,000 damage, there's plenty of times where you'll only have 6 elims, where you're doing 1k damage per elimination. The feedback feels so much better in that classic mode where you're getting way more elims, way more dopamine hitting, right? Per the damage you're doing. 5v5, and why has this changed so much, okay? 1, Season 9. This really got out of hand Season 9. It was a problem before, but in Season 9, you had health pools get increased alongside hitboxes, right? But a lot of time to kills didn't actually improve, and support healing over time has also gotten more and more powerful to help them adjust to the 5v5 format. Brig packs now burst, right? I could go down the list of BAP shift bursting now too in Overwatch 2. Go down the list of all these support abilities that have been buffed continuously, and then on top of that, raise everybody's health, give tanks numerous more passives and abilities to make them stronger. So, again, if you don't shoot at the super tanks in the front line, they'll never die and they'll just run you over. So a lot of the times, players are being forced to do, chip damage at a tank that will never die. This is what has happened with 5v5. The game has not been sped up. It's become more and more of a stalemate because in order to try to get people to solo tank, their answer has been buff tanks, buff tanks, buff tanks, buff tanks, buff tanks, passive, passive, passive. Buff tanks more. This most recent patch, Doomfist just got power crept. Doomfist just got power crept up to where the other tanks were. They finally nerfed Queen a little bit, who had 2.25x healing on her adrenaline, and Mauga got more buffs as well. Word on the street, it's another Mauga Kiri meta. Juno finally when I got knocked down a peg. So now in 5v5, And just go look at your damage. I want you to go look at your damage done per elimination done in 5v5 and then go compare it to Overwatch Classic. You will get way more kills in Overwatch Classic. The time to kills and the duels feel so much better. That's one thing that the original team got right. Ballpark health pools as well as hitbox sizes. Though, to be fair, they did have to mess with Hanzo's a lot around launch time of Overwatch 1. But generally speaking, across the board, they did a pretty good job with that. And it just feels better. Like, guys, the idea of a super tank is a failed concept. You cannot make it work. It's just Wheel of Fortune. Which tanks got the buffs this season? Which tanks got the nerfs this season? And no matter what it is, the matchup will be unwinnable in a one-on-one if you are on DPS or support against the tank. You will never beat the tank. That tank will win an overwhelmingly majority of the time because they have damage that's comparable to you and sustain that's 3 times, 4 times yours a lot of the time. But in Overwatch Classic, that's not the case. Any hero can win a 1v1 against each other. It's super, super interesting. Now, I think the snipers are definitely a little too good, especially with no hero limits. No hero limits, another big downside to the Overwatch Classic patch, right? Again, the game's better without hero limits. We all know this. But again, this is meant to be wacky and fun and a trip down memory lane. And it does suit those purposes. So that this is not me saying, oh, the devs should have done all this, blah, blah, blah. Like, obviously, this is for a trip down memory lane. They want to show people what the game was like at its launch. And obviously, how far it's come, too, for better or for worse in some situations. Definitely makes that a bit interesting. But again, like playing against, like nothing I played against felt oppressive except for Widowmaker, ironically, who still is just as busted back then as she is now. I mean, just super powerful character in general. But no, like it feels great. And that's the lesson. I think the biggest takeaway is Overwatch Classic just further proved to me that the idea of a super tank is a failed concept. It does not work. It does not make the game healthier. It does not add additional gameplay options. It takes away player agency. And it takes away a lot of people's freedom to choose the heroes they want, though I think that might be an issue in 5v5 in general for tank players, not just, you know, how strong is this tank, right? But no, I think that's the biggest takeaway, I would say. On top of that, the global regen passive, definitely a plus in the long run for the game. What are some of the other things? The big combos and big moments. I mean, there were plenty of times where I hear quadruple kill, quintuple kill, sextuple kill. And you just don't get that in 5v5 anymore. You just, like, things don't die. Like, you don't get the big combos. And just playing a little bit of Overwatch Classic, those combos were back. They were back. And the big reason for that is all of these characters are so much more relative. Tanks were a lot more like DPS then than they were a tank, like super tanks now. And I think that made for a healthier game for everybody. You just have to make a tank exchange that actually makes it enjoyable, like Reinhardt and Zarya when Zarya's bubbling. You can even bring back the D.Va. There's a lot of things you can do. Now, I do hear them on like, hey, it might be hard to get people to play tanks, but imagine if Junker Queen was in this. Imagine if Ramattra was in this. Imagine if any of these other characters were in this, that they spent years developing that added different gameplay options and different loops to the game that make the game so much more dynamic. You know, it makes me really excited for the 6v6 tests because these heroes are going to be, like, you know, opened up for gameplay loops and just in general different comps and combos that they weren't able to get before, that they just can't get in 5v5 because of the nature of the mode. And that's unchangeable. You cannot solve that. And I think I will say, despite what you prefer or don't prefer, each format definitely has its perks and its deficits, right? I think 6v6's biggest deficit undoubtedly is the queue times. I think when it comes to gameplay, it undoubtedly is better. You get better feedback for the damage you do in terms of limbs, right? It's less snowbally because, again, you just can't get rolled when your super tank is on the wrong hero. It's much harder for that to happen. It can happen, but it's much harder for that to happen. There's less counter swapping. There's more combos and big moments. There's way more teamwork. I mean, let's talk about voice chat. There were way more people like actually trying to combo and do stuff together. Granted, aside from the games where you get like 6 DPS or whatever it might be, which honestly makes me wonder if we had the global regen passive, would 6 DPS comps be as big of a problem as they were? Because then everybody can still play the game and heal if they take the right angles. There's a lot of, I wonder. You got to wonder, right? Maybe that is an option for them. But you know, in general, there are way more people talking to each other because more teamwork and strategy is required. And that makes Overwatch a better experience because it's a team-based game. Like, I could go in ranked right now and go 3 to 4 games in top 250, some oftentimes top 100, and have multiple games where nobody is saying a word on the mic. And you could say that's because of the ban system, the chat mute system that's way too aggressive. You could say that, and that could be true. That probably plays a part in it. But in general, there was just way more communication in the Overwatch Classic mode. And that's not nostalgia, by the way. That's out of necessity to combo and play the game and get value. Like, the gameplay loop and Blizzard should encourage players to communicate. It shouldn't punish them because a couple people, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it how it is. It shouldn't punish people, the whole system, because a couple people don't want to hit the block button to bad actors. You can block them. I don't care if they're freaking using racial slurs. I don't care if they're slurring at you. I don't care what they're saying. I don't care if they're talking trash. If it's a problem for you, report them and block them. It is that simple. We do not need to create a chat system that is banning people for saying or muting people for saying in chat. It's a competitive game. People are going to banter. As long as they're not slurring, as long as they're not saying anything really, really naughty, it should be okay. Because that's how people show their investment in competitive games, at least in the competitive environment. I think that's a no-brainer. I think that's an easy thing to do. And let's just be real for a second. The Overwatch 1 community was much better than the Overwatch 2 community in the sense that people were not afraid to communicate with each other. For better or for worse, I would say for better, even though it comes with some ugly baggage, the product overall benefits from people being encouraged to communicate rather than punished. There's no way to know that until you walk down the ropes and you make the tighter system, but it's absolutely fair to say at this point that it just didn't work. And Overwatch Classic proved that encouraging players to have more teamwork and work together more makes a healthier Overwatch, especially when everybody's more relative to each other. Really brilliant game design from the original Team 4 to understand that probably is the way to go in making characters more relative to each other. But again, a lot to learn. We also learned that it's nice to appreciate the quality of life changes like Reaper canceling Wraith, Genji canceling Deflect, not getting screen locked. It shows how far Overwatch's design did come in terms of quality of life for the original cast. If only they had gameplay loops to really express themselves and show what they're capable of, right? So again, it was a great experience. I'm really glad that they did it. I think they should keep doing stuff like this. It's super smart. I'm stoked for DPS Doomfist to come back. And big props to the team for finding a way to implement this into the Overwatch 2 client and keep the player base unified by putting it in some form of arcade mode. But what did you notice about playing Overwatch Classic? To me, playing Hanzo felt 1,000 times better than any version of Hanzo I've played since BAP came out. That Hanzo felt better. My Dragon Strike can get kills. People can't get bailed out for free. I have Scatter Arrow is crazy good. And it's been very, very fun for me to take a trip down memory lane and bust out the OG Hanzo gods. Me, Mangachu, Seagull, and Raxu from NA back in the day, at least. We were the NA Hanzo players. So, good times, man. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. Let me know what you think about Overwatch Classic. What did you notice about it? Did you notice how many limbs you were getting per 1,000 damage done? Did you notice that it had doubled since the live version of 5v5? I don't know. You tell me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch y'all next time. Take care. Peace out. Much love.